Today we're going to be talking about a Tag Heuer Carrera. This is going to be a special McLaren 1974 edition. Welcome back, everybody. As I said, today we're going to be talking about this Tag Heuer Carrera. It is a 1974 McLaren edition. Now, I do want to kind of dig into that date because that is not referring to the watch itself. It's not like a rendition of a 1974 watch. Really what it is it's a very iconic year for the company McLaren. And if you're not familiar with the racing scene, it is a very high-end performance vehicle. And it's something you'll find on the racetrack. You can find them, on the streets. Not so many on the streets. Of course, if you go to Dubai, it's completely different, story. But just they make really, really fast cars. And so it's really fitting for, Tag Heuer to incorporate it into their Carrera line because they do have a very large presence in the racing community. And 1974 was the first year that they won the F1 championship. Of course, that's going to be Formula One. We've done a couple of videos kind of talking about Formula One, the differences between those races and some of the other types of races that we have, that we carry on in our society when it comes to four-wheeled vehicles. Now, in 1974, as I said, they won the championship. Now, I do want to kind of dig into that a little bit because the way that Formula One works, they kind of break down these championships completely differently than you would, maybe think. So, of course, they have what they call a driver championship, and then they have the constructor championship. And so a driver championship is where some individual racer, you name it, the person that's, behind the wheel of the car, they actually score the most points throughout the season. And of course, you don't have to, win on the very last race by getting first place to get it. It's not like you're all in one race and at the end of it, whoever's in first place wins. It is to an extent, but it's not just one race. These people go through a bunch of races throughout the season. And as you score, depending on where you are on the podium, first, second, third, or even, as the not ranks, but the positions that you finish in, as they keep going down, you are awarded fewer and fewer points. So at the end of the year, the driver with the cumulative most amount of points is deemed the champion for the year. Now, I mentioned in 1974, we've got our first McLaren victory, and this is going to be a driver championship. So the way that you win the constructor championship is by the brand itself, by the brand of car. So in this case, it's going to be McLaren. So that would mean that McLaren won the driver championship that year, but did not win the constructor championship. Now, the way that works is because there are multiple cars on the racetrack that are going to be developed by the same company. So you might have a couple Ferraris, a few, McLarens, we've done some Bentleys before, on these videos, you'll have all these different manufacturers that are on the track. Now, if you're a manufacturer and you've got multiple vehicles and they all score a high position, as a company, you're getting more points for a race. So it's entirely possible for a company to have, constructor championships, but not actually be the winner of the year, not have the driver championship. And that is very similar to how McLaren's, history within Formula One has been. They are the second oldest and most successful team in Formula One behind Ferrari. They've got 8 driver championships and 12 constructor championships. Now they've won over 180 or 182 races so far, so it's not like it's a one-time fluke. I mean, it's a very dominant team. And of course, this watch is meant to commemorate that first year that McLaren took home the gold. And so it is a 1974 edition. You'll notice that this watch has a white and orange color scheme with obviously some black accents as well. But it's very interesting. If you go back in history and look at the tapes, in 1974, the car was not white and orange. In fact, it was white and red because they had just gotten a deal with Philip Morris, and the company Marlboro. I'm sure we all remember all of the advertising that used to come about before the laws kind of changed. Well, back in the day, they were huge sponsors. And so, of course, during the Marlboro days, they did have a red and white with black accent color scheme going on. But in 1981, sometime around there, the company was taken over by Rod Dennis. He had a completely different approach to kind of how they would handle and manage the team. It led McLaren into their most successful era with, iconic racing legends like Niki Lauda and Ayrton Senna. They drove for Team McLaren during this, epic portion of McLaren's history. And it was during that time that they actually came out with the orange and white color scheme. Now, going back to the beginning of McLaren, it was started by a man named Bruce McLaren. That was his name. He was native to the country of New Zealand. And I did a video a few weeks back on a Bulgari Octo. It was a all blacks version, which is the New Zealand rugby team. And I made a comment in there about the color scheme of the watch matching the team, which was of course black with silver. It was a silver fern leaf is the logo, if you will, of the team. Well, when Bruce started McLaren, the color scheme that he chose to use was that black and gray. And so I thought that kind of might, wrap it in a little bit. They did transition from the black and gray to, there was a hint of green thrown in there before this orange and white and red and white kind of came into play. Now, the watch itself is a 43 millimeter case, so it's going to be right in that sweet spot for today's, timepieces, the contemporary watches. It's made out of stainless steel, and it does have, this iconic, rubber strap, but it's not just a rubber strap. They use on a lot of these special editions, they do design them to look like the treads of a tire. So it's entirely in line with the racing theme. We kind of talked about it on the Monaco Grand Prix Carrera that I did a video on, had a very similar strap. Now on the back of this one, you'll notice that it does have the exhibition case back. It's more of a smoked crystal, so you can't really see through it with the kind of clarity that you can on some of the other watches, but it's enough to really see what's going on inside. And of course, on the back, you've got the 40th anniversary of McLaren first World Championship. It's got one of the logos on there. Some really good information about the watch, like the fact that there were only 1,974 of them made. This is number 569, so it's definitely a limited production watch. Inside this watch, though, you're going to find the 1887 caliber movement. And so that's going to have a 50-hour power reserve, roughly. If you've got the chronograph engaged like I have here, that power reserve is going to drop to a little closer to 40 hours. Of course, when you're using the chronograph, McLaren, or Tag and McLaren, they came up with a great idea of using, and it's something that we find very common in chronographs and sport watches, but they use a slight color scheme to differentiate between your normal time counting hands and the ones that are used on the chronograph. In this case, all of the chronograph functions are going to be featured with an orange accent on the hand. So you see this big counting seconds up here. This is going to be my chronograph seconds that I can stop and start. On the 12 o'clock hour marker, it's a little hidden by where the hour hand is, but you'll notice, there we go, that we've got an orange tip here up at the 30-minute counter. We've got an orange tip down here at the 12-hour counter. Of course, at 9 o'clock, you've got your running seconds and you've got your standard minutes and hours, and all of those are just going to have a non-orange standard hand. And if you ever get confused, obviously the big hand is generally going to be the chronograph hand, but they also threw in an orange accent up here on the stop-start pusher. So it really flows nice. It's got a really pleasant vibe to it. It is soft with the white, but it has a little bit of that flair to it with the orange. It's not quite as in your face as one of the Omega Planet Oceans, but it does have a little subtle hint of the orange. And personally, it's one of my favorite colors, so I would love to get one of these in my collection. I can't do a lot of orange, but if it's just a splash, I think it can go a long way. Come check it out at SwissWatchExpo before it's gone.